Thank you and good morning. And I'd like to thank the previous panel, Samuel and Marta, for setting me up pretty well here for some of the things I'd like to discuss. So crypto bust or boom? The answer is yes. Okay, that didn't work. I won't be able to provide a definitive answer on this, but I will try today to provide some context and how, at least we at Binance, think about this and how we're working through these cycles regardless. Because the fact of the matter is what happens in the market versus what you actually build as a company, you need to focus quite clearly on what you need to do and ignore some of the noise. That said, I'll provide a little bit of my personal view. Previously, I was with the NBA in China. During that time, we saw sports media rights triple in value over the course of 3 years. I also moved to China in 2009 as GDP growth was decreasing from 10% to 7% a year. That's a $500 billion delta, and so we saw a number of industries dealing with that. Prior to that, I was in the US doing real estate private equity, leading up into the 2009 or 2008 global financial crisis. And I started my career doing tech investment banking in San Francisco during the original dot-com boom. So I've seen a few booms and busts. And so I'll start with that. Judging by the folks in the room, there's probably a lot of folks that might be familiar with this chart. This is the NASDAQ beginning with the internet era when Netscape IPO'd in 1995. And a lot of you may be familiar with the peak in 2000, where the index dropped from 5,100 down to 1,100. During that time, global equity markets lost $5 trillion in value. But of course, the market has eventually picked up, and I think we would argue that some of the largest tech companies that came out of that era are still thriving today. If at that time in 1999, during this market decline, you took a look at the landscape, Yahoo was a dominant search engine and amongst many, many search engines. And at the time, I was a young investment banker, and an analyst told me about this new search engine that was coming up, and they're raising a private round, and we should really take a look at this, and what could they possibly offer? Well, if you had that mindset, you would have missed out on a 2004 IPO by a company called Google, which has subsequently outperformed the NASDAQ 17 times to 3 times during that time. So when you talk about crypto, I'd like to provide a little bit of context on time frames we're talking about. So here we were talking about 25 years, now we're talking about the past 15 years, and then let's just take quickly a look at the past 10 years. This is BTC's price performance relative to the flat line, which is actually Google, not NASDAQ. And so since the emergence of BTC, you've seen a 90,000x return versus a 6x for Google over the past 10 years. Now, a lot of attention, and I think one of the reasons why this topic has come about, has been the performance of Bitcoin in 2017 leading into 2018. A big drop there, obviously. But still, if you were in cryptocurrency 2 years ago, you still outperformed Google 300% to 45%. So again, everything here is contextual, and I'll raise a couple points later on in the presentation, but want to set this up a bit so that we have a little bit of timing consideration here. This is a very young industry. And then lastly, I'd like to take a look at this chart, which looks a lot like Bitcoin in 2017 leading in 2018, but this is actually Bitcoin in 2011. It dropped from a peak of, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to refer to my notes here, $32 down to $2. That's a 94% decline compared to the decline in 17, which was only 84%. And if you look at the history of Bitcoin, this happened also in 2013. There was a 92% decline in 2013. So those of us that have been in this space for a while have seen this pattern. It's not new. And then lastly, I'll just chart the blue line here over the last less than 2 years has actually been the BNB coin, the Binance coin, relative to Bitcoin, which is now trading at an all-time high against Bitcoin. And we attribute that actually not to market craze, but really, hopefully we're one of the companies that's being recognized as actually building a product and building utility and building value to users. So this is sort of a fun exercise to look at, but not particularly academic. But my point here is if you dig deeper into these, I would look at this as some of the indicative metrics I look at as to whether or not this matters at the time and whether or not the question of bust or boom is relevant. I kind of arrive at no, it's just really too early. The ownership, the one thing that the boom and bust cycle did do in 2017 was really grow the breadth of ownership in crypto. So prior to 2017, only 0.1% of the global population even held any crypto, and it's probably a lot less than that. That's a probably aggressive assumption. Currently, we're looking at approximately 1%, so maybe somewhere between 60 and 80 million people hold some kind of crypto, where I would view the tipping point to be around 10%. So we're an order of magnitude away from the tipping point. And by way of comparison, smartphones had penetrated 1% of the population in 2006, got to 10% in 2011. So it took 5 years. I'm not going to speculate on how long the tipping point will be, but if you take a look at a 10x order of magnitude in 1 year, you can see this happening pretty quickly once there's another cycle. I'll also mention, by the way, the previous graphs I finished about a week and a half ago, so it doesn't take into account the last couple of days of trading and what we've seen. So some of these numbers here are going to be a little bit off, and as Sam mentioned, off by perhaps 25%. I'm looking at the last bullet. The value of the total value of crypto now is, I think, 175 billion as of today. But regardless, it's less than 1% of the New York Stock Exchange. Skipping around back to spending. So globally, only $2 billion were actually of crypto were actually spent in 2017, and that's when these tokens were peaking, versus $10 trillion spent just on retail sales in the U.S. and China. So this is really a drop in the bucket. I think Marta pointed that out as well, that when you look at this on a global basis, this is still a very, very small industry. From a trading standpoint, about 5% of folks who even hold crypto are active traders, and with a trading volume of about 35 billion. Reported trading volume. So we're all aware that there's probably a lot of false numbers out there, and so if you adjust that may be significantly smaller. So how do we look at this going forward, these markets? Well, I'd like to take a look at some of these as leading indicators. One is the talent that's coming into this industry, and when I look around this room, this is an impressive bunch of credentials, and so I'm pretty optimistic about what the future holds here. But on the academic front, we do look at, frankly, even job applicants coming in and the quality of schools that they're coming from, the interest level, the curriculum that schools are launching. I think these are good leading indicators for any industry. Of course, the quality of tech, the engineers and the type of innovation that's happening. And lastly, what trails that is really business quality. How are the business leaders looking? And that, compared to 5 years ago, I think has gone up tremendously. DApps is another metric to look at. There's about 2,700 now, and over the past month or so, it's been about 100, 150 new DApps per month. However, very, very small. Combined 1.8 million transactions daily, and a pretty small amount, $16 million a day transacted. So the conclusion here is, from a current status of the industry standpoint, and depending on what metrics you're looking at, we are 1 to 2 orders of magnitude away from a tipping point. But again, that can happen very, very quickly. And at Binance, our long-term plan is really just to keep our heads down and build. So what is Binance? I'm not sure how familiar the room here is, but we're an ecosystem of a cryptocurrency ecosystem, which we're largely known for our exchange, but we do also have academy and research, which provides, we hope, more in-depth educational videos on how crypto works, and then specifically on the tokens and coins that we list, some more detailed analysis on its benefits, uses, etc. We also have Launchpad, which advises on projects that are considering listing. We also have a blockchain charity foundation, which is our attempt to apply blockchain to charities and prove the both the transparency of the blockchain as well as the amount of utility one gets from a dollar donated to the ultimate end user. Trust Wallet, I believe it was Marta that mentioned the usability of wallets. We absolutely agree with that. We have a wallet called Trust Wallet that still needs a lot of improvement, but we think that we're working quite hard to make sure that is one of the best in breed wallets out there. Binance Labs is a corporate venturing arm that invests into projects that are helping to grow this industry. Scalability is one of the biggest areas of investment because, as Marta mentioned, usability is key here, and there are a lot of roadblocks right now to day-to-day usability. And then finally, we will be launching a DEX, a decentralized version of our exchange in the coming months. And lastly, the Binance Coin is our native coin that is largely used to pay for trading commissions on our exchange. But we've extended the utility, and you can see sort of the partners here that we work hard to increase its usability, and that we think is driving the value more than speculators and traders, day traders. So one thing I will mention is that the Binance Coin right now sits on ETH. It will be migrating to a native Binance chain that would be native to the DEX that will hopefully solve a lot of the problems with one second transaction times. And that would be a significant improvement over ETH, which is around 20 seconds, and then BTC, which is in the minutes. Lastly, really the slide here is just to show the speed at which we're building products and launching products. So we're not necessarily trying to be first to market, but we are trying to build products first and have those ready for market when the timing is right. So you can see we actually are a relatively new company. Launched our exchange in July of 2017, so less than 2 years old. However, I think the culture of building products and the speed at which we do so has gotten us to what we're largely considered the #1 exchange by volume and by real volume. So lastly, all of this work is really to support our overall mission and vision here, which is frankly to spread the freedom of money in a fair, ethical, and efficient way. And ultimately, we want to be a core infrastructure provider, not necessarily known as whether we're an exchange in 10 years or not. Is not the plan. It's really to be that infrastructure provider. So of the projects that we see here, if there's any way that we can help benefit or drive, we welcome that. And I'm, I guess, a little bit ahead of schedule here. So get you guys back on track. Thank you.